this is number 14, and we've just looked, and we're now looking at investment appraisal. We just looked at net present value, and now we're going to have a look at the average rate of return, and we're going to see how that works. Right, so once again, we've got the same example on here. The initial cost is 20 million quid, the returns are 10 million, 20 million, and 20 million. And what we're looking at is the percentage return on each investment. So if, for instance, a project gives you a 50% average rate of return, which of course is extremely high, and you invest £10 million in that project, what that means is that every single year you're going to get a £5 million return because the average rate of return is 50%. Right. The good thing about the average rate of return, we can compare it with the return on capital employed. Why can we do that? Because the return on capital employed is a figure that shows the return that you're getting back from your current level of investment. So the average rate of return is the future prediction, and the return on capital employed is for the past. Okay, so we can compare it with the return on capital employed from there. There are 4 steps in working out the average rate of return. You work out the total return on the project, which is pretty easy. You just add up all these numbers here, which come to £50 million. Then you subtract the cost of the project, which here is 20 million. Then you divide by the number of years. That gives you the net return per annum. Then once you've got that figure, you divide that again by the initial cost. So you use the initial cost twice. Now, to give an example of this, over here, the initial project is 20 million quid. We add up all the returns, 10, 20, 20, that comes to 50 million pounds. Then we do 50 million minus 20 million, which is equal to 30 million. That's the second stage. Taking away the initial cost, subtract the cost of the project. Then we divide that by the number of years, so that's 30 million divided by 3. Hey ho, it always got nice, easy figures to work with. 30 million divided by 3 is equal to 10 million pounds. And then finally we get the 10 million, and then we divide that by the initial cost, which happens to be 20 million here. Okay, then you do 10 divided by 20 times 100 over 1, and that comes out as 50%. Okay, so what are the advantages of the average rate of return is that it uses all of the cash flows. So it uses all of these figures. You might say, well, so does the net present value, and you are correct. But when we look at the payback period, it only looks at those figures up until you pay back the project. It focuses on the idea of profitability, in exactly the same way that the return on the capital employed also looks at profitability. And it's easy to compare, and you would normally compare it with ROCE or with the bank rate. So if you get 3% from the bank, that is a guaranteed return. If you run your own business, you may get a 20% return. If you get a 20% return, then clearly that is far more than 3% you get from the bank, so that's clearly quite a good business. The disadvantage of the average rate of return is that it does not take into account the time value of money at all. So all the timing of the cash flows. So on this one, because we get to 50 million, just make the assumption that we get 50 million quid in the third year, 0 million and 0 million from there. Now clearly that project would not be as good as this one here, but you would come up with exactly the same average rate of return. So it ignores when the money comes in, and the good thing about net present value is it takes into account the time value of money, as we've just discussed on lesson 13. What we're doing now is we're building a picture of the whole business. So for instance, we know that the NPV is 20.1 million. Hopefully we know what that means, that we're making 20 million pounds on that project, actually from a 20 million pound investment. So we're really making 40.1 million, then we've got to subtract that 20 million. So making that over and above the initial investment. We've got an average rate of return of 50%. We can compare that with ROCE. Now just say this business currently has a ROCE of 2.5%, then clearly you would go ahead with the project because it's clearly much better than the firm is doing right now. The next thing we've got to ask, well, what about cash flow? And for the cash flow, we look at payback, which we're going to have a look at in lesson 14. So this basis here is the average rate of return. The big one that people tend to forget is to subtract that figure there. But if you can remember when you go into the example that there are 4 steps in the whole process, and then you're probably going to come up with the right answer. Okay, thank you.